we are gathered here today to... That's great. I don't even know how I'm supposed to do this any better. I'm going to be defending Kenyan guys. Like, the Kenyan men have been receiving quite a lot of flack online, and honestly, I feel like even though I have taken a shit on them before, and even though I am myself a Kenyan man, I do feel like maybe we've received a little too much flack as Kenyan men, so maybe I should do a little bit of defense. Because, I'm a Kenyan man. Plus, also, for some reason, it's like people just felt like it was such an easy thing to hit a Kenyan man. And it's honestly getting to a point where, like, people are just going to take a dump at Kenyan men for stuff that Kenyan men shouldn't probably even be blamed for. But anyways, you can probably deliberate on whether Kenyan men should be blamed for that or not once I get done with the episode. But for now, I think I should probably start by talking about how it is that I ended up coming to this situation. But before I can do that, where my manners, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. This is a much shortened, more raw version, less edity, with a few less bits, because I'm on break and I kind of wanted to make these episodes just to throw in there about some of my more introspective thoughts to occupy the time before I come back to do the normal episodes. Now, sometime recently, I was alerted via WhatsApp of a tweet that a lady had put out, which detailed that if you take away one or two certain aspects, you would find that men don't really have much to offer, of which another woman decided to quote reply it and state that Kenyan men have zero appeal and we have nothing to offer. Now, of course, it's not like I've run away from these allegations and these statements. Hell, I've even sided with them on quite a number of occasions. And I've even spoken about how the whole thing of Kenyan guys wanting to take a babe out on a date to the club is one of the dumbest things that I have ever heard. But even with that said, I've never really gotten to a point where I've been like, Kenyan men have nothing to offer. And it's at this point where now I have to start siding with the Kenyan men for a little bit. But before I can get into any of that, let me just read the original tweet, which says, and I quote, "You take marriage and money off the table and you quickly realize a lot of men have nothing to offer. No charisma, no conversation skills, no intellect, no emotional availability, no sense of humor, no sense of direction, no leadership, no future aspirations, nothing." End quote. Now, I could probably go into this and, I'll definitely do that in a little bit. But first, I need to deal with the quoted reply that was sent to me along with this original tweet, which said, and I quote, "I keep saying this. Kenyan men have zero appeal. I've dated all sorts. Doctors, lawyers, presidents. There's nothing at all." End quote. Now, I'd have let the original tweet go because, probably it's a babe who's just chasing a bunch of clout. And, maybe even the babe who's doing the quoted reply is doing the same thing. But honestly, I feel like this is a little too harsh even on Kenyan guys. And, to be very honest, like, I do have my reservations about, how a lot of guys will go out and date babes and the approaches and shit. But honestly, this is a little too harsh for most Kenyan guys. And especially the way the babe who replied it kind of went at everything. It just seemed like she just had some level of bile against Kenyan dudes. But even before I can get into all of that, the first thing that I found to be particularly odd was the fact that she said that she's dated all sorts and she included presidents. And I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing, but we've had 5 presidents in this country and all of them got into office while married. And even before they got into office, they were married. So how exactly was she dating these niggas? Like, I don't know. If she was dating them and they were already married, then technically she was a side chick. So the guy not having any appeal, it's probably a part of the package. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing, but usually whenever it comes to the side chick, it's not like you're really trying to be the most interesting version of yourself as a guy. Most times if it's a side chick, she knows very well she's a side and there's nothing too big about it besides the fact that there's some sort of gain she's getting, and you being an interesting conversationalist is not one of those gains. But anyways, maybe she, dated some school president or president of a union or some activist group. So, I'll kind of leave it at that. The other thing that I found to be particularly odd was the fact that she mentioned doctors and lawyers. And I don't know, like I said, maybe it's just a me thing, but I tend to think that, especially with the professions that pay well but are also super hard to, like go through school and shit because of the number of years, I feel like they kind of deserve a pass. Because you look at it, doctors, lawyers, okay, fuck the presidents, throw in something like engineers, architects. All of these guys are people that will earn pretty good money, or at least sufficiently good money, which will put them on her radar. Now, considering that these guys had to go through school for a bunch of years, more than most people spend in school on both the undergrad and masters, I feel like they deserve a pass for not being the most interesting. Like, you think about it, for the basic doctor, that's about 6 years. If they decided to go and pursue a certain field of sorts, or decided to become surgeons and shit, you're looking at maybe 8, possibly 10 or 12 years going through school so that you can be at the top of your field and be particularly good at your job. If you expect that guy to be interesting fresh from the jump, you have another thing coming. This is someone that spent the same amount of time I spent in both primary and high school just getting to the point of their profession from the beginning of university so that they can be particularly good at their job. You look at architects, it's not too far off. They're also doing around about 6 years. Law school people, round about 6 years as well, because it's 4 years for the law degree and 2 other years in law school. You're looking at most of these people, they're doing a shit ton of time in school, they're crunching books all day, and you expect them to be interesting. Like, I don't even know what the hell is wrong with some of these people, because I feel like y'all are reaching a little too much, because I feel like, considering the fact that they get to the point where they are at this particular profession making such good money, and or the fact that they have to stay on top of their game, which also includes the likes of engineering people and IT people and shit, I feel like they deserve some sort of achievement pass to not have to be as interesting in terms of being a conversationalist as the regular person that doesn't have as intense of a job is expected to be. Think of it as like an N-word pass or like pretty privilege. When you kind of think about it, pretty privilege means that the babe doesn't have to be as interesting, but the mere fact that they are particularly good looking means that they will still be tolerated even though they may have shortcomings or may not necessarily live up to the levels that some guys may want their partners to be at. It's kind of the same thing. You kind of think about it like that, I feel like that makes a little bit more sense. But anyways, since I'm not turning this entire episode into me trying to defend doctors, lawyers, engineers, and IT people, let's go back to the whole you take marriage and money off the table and you quickly realize a lot of men have nothing to offer. I don't know. When you kind of think about it, to some degree, it's actually not entirely a bad thing. All right. And of course, I can get into the whole trying to justify things by flipping the tables around and saying, oh, well, if you took most of the babes out here and you put them in buoys and, like covered everything but the eyes and, made sure that they just managed to bag the dude that they're with entirely through household skills, conversational skills, and, your possibility to be celibate and shit, we probably wouldn't have any women to marry. Like, I could go and take that route and I can go down it and I can use it to defend dudes till the ends of the earth. But personally, I don't feel like doing that. I think there's a better way to kind of explain this without trying to poke and look for holes on the other side. And the simpler way I choose to do this is to just discuss why it is Kenyan men aren't particularly, abundant in a sense of humor, carrying some level of emotional availability, pretty good in terms of conversational and social skills and shit. Like, I'd much rather discuss why it is Kenyan men aren't there instead of trying to turn the tables around, all right? Like, take, for example, the fact that Kenyan men aren't as, whatever it is that these babes want as they can be because, our dads didn't really need to be those things to bag a woman, or at least to bag our moms. Because you kind of think about it, it's not like you will find every single Kenyan dad busy talking about how he had to go and hit on your mom and he managed to do A, B, C, D with her. Like, the guy had this incredible sense of humor or he knew how to do all of these things. A lot of these guys, like, they married for convenience. A lot of them who met in the city and they got married, yes, they spoke to each other, but it's not like having a sense of humor was that high up on the list. It was good to have, but it wasn't that high up on the list. They weren't required to be emotionally available. They weren't required to have any more conversation skills than those to get them through getting the message across. So for the most part, if you take that, throw in a little smidge of romance here and there, you have what our parents had. So now you expect us to take those teachings and then be able to get babes today and still inject a bunch of humor, a bunch of emotional availability and shit. And we didn't see that happen back in the day. We haven't heard stories of that happen back in the day. Like, what exactly would you expect? Although, then again, that is still not as strong an argument, in my opinion, just mostly because I tend to think that it's not like we just learn from our dads, we also have to learn from other men. But at least in my personal opinion, I feel like the main reason why us Kenyan guys do not have the emotional availability or the conversation skills or even the sense of humor that a lot of these women talk about mostly comes down to the fact that we haven't needed to have them, at least over the past maybe decade or maybe 12, 13, 14 years. At least in my opinion. Because as someone who's managed to observe the dating market, granted I was a teenager then, so, my view could be pretty skewed. When I kind of think about all these past years of guys and hitting on women and how guys have been trying to bag babes, I can clearly see why conversation skills weren't all that important. I can see why emotional availability wasn't all that important. Because when I think about it, like, we kind of moved from the era of trying to pick up women through conversation, and we moved to the, if you want to pick up a babe, you take her to the club and you marinate type of era. And by all means, it's worked for quite a number of dudes, and if anything, it's a clear sign that you don't necessarily need to have the best conversation skills as long as you can get to a point when you guys can mingle and interact and enjoy each other's company over a drink more so, then you can probably do pretty well as, guy and babe. And you see it happen all the time. You find that people are rarely trying to meet new people, and if someone's meeting someone else that's supposedly new, it's probably a friend of a friend. So, y'all are probably either getting hooked up or you're being introduced to someone else from another friend group that, your friend or friends are a part of. And all of a sudden, that whole blending together, you meet this person that you all of a sudden like, then you guys will plan and probably go out to the club together and shit, share a couple of drinks, cocktails, and probably get laid. And then at that point, whatever attraction was initially there is heightened, so you guys are super interested in each other and you guys can turn that into a relationship. Like, it's kind of been flowing like this, and for the most part, save for the initial meeting when the two of you meet and probably get to talk a little bit, there's not that much conversation skills that you necessarily need as a guy, especially considering that a lot of these meetups with the different friend groups will happen at events where there is alcohol. So this guy, at the very least, just needs to at least be introduced to you and have a little bit of hello talk skills. So, barely any conversation skills, a little bit of alcohol so that he can get the liquid courage and she can also marinate herself a little bit. And of course, the very nice, big, but also very casual balls that come with liquid courage. And dude is probably going to manage to bag the babe, or at least that's what he's going to use to bag the babe. And it has worked for him, or at least it might work for him at least a couple of times. So you think about it, how exactly do you expect such a guy to want to go and develop his conversation skills, to go and establish some level of emotional intelligence, try and develop some sense of humor, and possibly create this very nice cocktail combination of all of these things that would make you very, very, very attracted to this man when he can do whatever it is that he's been doing before, which has still been working. In short, what I'm trying to tell you is we're in an era where having conversation skills and having a sense of humor isn't entirely all that necessary for you as a guy, as opposed to having money and knowing how to go through the checklist of things that I already mentioned earlier. Like, the whole time when having good conversation and social skills was like a big thing was like the early 2000s till like maybe early 2010s, and that era's kind of moved. And to be quite honest, having those skills right now is more of a request or an added advantage as opposed to a requirement. Like, if it's not a need, then most guys probably won't be trying to have them, is what I'm trying to say. And to kind of conclude all of this, I'll just say that, as of right now, because we don't need to be better, it's still technically a choice which very few men will choose because it means more effort, more work for something that a lot of guys have managed to get using a little bit of money and, a little bit of booze here and there and a good time. But still, even with that said, maybe we need to make it a need so that we can have that shift. But then again, the current era that we're in right now in terms of dating is a lot less about conversation and a lot more about compatibility, or as people like to casually say, vibes. So as good of a talker as you are, if you don't vibe well with the other person, if you don't feel like you're compatible with the other person, or if the other person doesn't feel that way, it doesn't really carry all that much water. Although, then again, maybe I might be wrong about all of this shit and my view on this is very myopic, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at BagakaTheD. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.